All right. Well, thank you very much, Mark. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, to share the results of my research. I put a lot of time into it, and it's exciting. It gives me a reason to do all the research, so now I get to share it. It's very fulfilling for me. I always start my talks with a particular exercise, and most of you are familiar with that at this point because you've been to talks before, but let me run you through it. The first thing that we do is to take a moment to be conscious of our consciousness. Just take a second and be aware of your awareness. I know it sounds maybe contradictory, but basically you take a moment to look inside and see where your attention is coming from. What is it in you that is paying attention right now? When you track down the origin of your attention, you've looked in the direction of you're finding your true self. It can, for some people, it can be a huge thing, but it's altogether an interesting exercise, and it helps me give a better talk. So thank you. I'm a technical, scientific type person myself, and I study esoterics. So for me to try to bring the two together has been a very interesting challenge and an opportunity to see, well, you'll see, where they can mix and where they can't. I've been working in a technical field now, working with computers for 30 years, more than that. And I also studied chemistry in college. I got to start in science, engineering, the chemistry, the computers. To me, the very best thing about scientific focus is that you get to know some true things. And I think that the people I work with too, in general, that's one of the motivations for getting into a technical or scientific field, is that you get to be right. I suppose that's an egotistic thing to say, but you get to figure some things out, say what they are, and that's right. If your program runs, it runs. You don't have an art director who comes in and says, well, you should add more blue, and then what can you say? That the art director said more blue. But if your program runs, you're right. Behind scientific endeavors is a premise, and behind esoterics, the same premise that there's reality, and we're trying to understand it. We're trying to come up with an explanation that we can call truth. Science is doing this, describing this reality through experiments and observations, and esoterics is doing it through a different way. We'll talk about where the information comes from, that the esoteric presentation comes from. But eventually those two things have to agree, because it's just the one reality they're both trying to describe. They're not quite ready to agree, but we'll talk about where they might. And if you have a problem with the idea that there is a reality that we're trying to describe, then maybe I need to give another talk on philosophy. But this isn't the right talk for that. We're going to assume that there is a reality to be described. Science and technology right now, look how powerful that is. It's an open question whether with the aid of science and technology we're going to destroy humanity and life on this planet. That brings a certain urgency to this point about how science can interrelate with esoterics. It can't continue as it has. And I'll go into some of the reasons, but science and technology have created possibilities that cannot go on the way they have gone without massive changes to humanity and to the planet. And we have to think about how that might take place. Part of the problem is that humanity itself is basically emotionally focused, and to a large degree a rather immature level of emotional focus, even at the highest levels of our government and in so many different areas. How do you trust a child that could have a tantrum with a weapon? Yet those people run governments and have nuclear weapons in their hands. It's a scary time. It has been for quite a while. I'm not going to just be scaring you today, though. I'm going to hopefully be telling you some of the reasons that there is hope. And just to kind of give you an overview of what I'll be covering here so that there's a little navigation for you. We're going to talk about why science is good, because it really is. It's amazing. I love science. I study it just for pure enjoyment. And then I'll talk about the bad side of science, how human nature has messed with what the potential of science is, what we might try to do about the bad side, how we might try to bridge science and esoterics, and then we'll just talk about some of the topics that are controversial these days where science weighs in and where esoterics weighs in. You don't read in the paper about how esoterics has an attitude about these things. It's very different than a conventional view. And then I'll close with some really interesting predictions. Throughout the esoteric books, they talk about future years and future discoveries, some of which science could benefit from greatly if it were to take it as a hint and explore some of those. So, one thing that keeps me excited about science is reading Science News magazine. And I've laid out the books that are my sources and a copy of Science News magazine on the back table here. And in the handout, I mention all the books that I'll be talking about today, or most of them. And I'll mention, just to give you some idea of some of the interesting things I read in Science News, I'll be mentioning some of the fascinating stories, the very latest science discoveries. And science is going to just keep right on discovering things because of this wonderful thing called the experimental method. Let's see what's true. Let's try an experiment. We have an idea, let's put it out there. Let's see if we change this, if we change that, what happens, observe it carefully. It's a wonderful method, and it actually applies really well to ourselves, to our subjective lives. And I was just trying to imagine recently, what if I treated every decision I made, or at least somewhat insignificant decisions, if I treated that like an experiment and looked at the results of that decision and said, now I know that I won't do that again. If I could just reach that conclusion, I would eat better, that's for sure. So, it's been a tremendous gift to humanity to have science step in and say, okay, let's straighten out some of the strange myths that we've got from religions or whatever, and let's get some actual facts to work with. As I said, I work in the high-tech world, and I work with people in India. And I'm just going through a set of examples of the amazing things in science these days. I talk to people in India on video conference daily. And it's just like talking to someone here on video conference. 15 years ago when I started, or 16 when I started with this company, you could talk to people on the phone in India, and there was lag, and you had to wait, be sure they heard what you said, so you'd step on their reply. It took some skill to talk to somebody on the phone so far away. Now, there's the person, you're talking to them. It's literally the other side of the planet. I think that now they must be sending the signals through undersea cables, optical cables, instead of bouncing it off geosynchronous satellites. In the past, that takes longer when they do that. Either of those things is miraculous. And it brings the world together. That's so fascinating that I have a phone in my pocket right now. I could call somebody in Kazakhstan. Cell phones are everywhere. You can talk to just about anybody on the planet. Anybody with a cell phone, you can call them. That's amazing. Yeah, there's a comedian, Louis C.K., a bit disgraced lately, but he has a funny bit about, he has a bit called I Hate Verizon. And people, they say to him, I hate Verizon, I can't get a signal exactly where I want it. He said, really, you hate Verizon, but do you realize what you've got there? Just what I just talked about, you can talk to anybody in the world, you can pull that out and talk to them. You could keep it in perspective that you can do that, even though you don't always get a signal. And then he says, and then there's the person that complains to me, I spent 45 minutes on the runway at the airport. It was awful. And he says, yeah, that's awful. And then you flew in the air like a Greek god. Just keep that in perspective. Maybe you spent 45 minutes there, but you flew through the air. Since Nikola Tesla gave us the electric motor, look how it's changed things. Look at electricity everywhere. What a genius he was, bringing electricity into our lives. That's got to be part of some much bigger plan that electricity should enter the picture for us. Another amazing thing to me personally is medical science. It's a controversial topic too that we'll come back to in a couple of ways, but several years ago I had a heart valve repaired, and open heart surgery is not as big a deal as it used to be. It was still a big deal, but it's almost routine. They take you in, open you up, stop your heart, fix things, sew you back up, and that is miraculous. And it's extended my life. I really am grateful for and that's a lot of work to figure out how to do that safely. It's taken many years. Very impressive work. And look at cancer cures now, that's so much better than it was with chemotherapy. It's always a dodgy thing, you know, the poison aspect of chemotherapy, but still people in general are living much longer who are diagnosed with cancer. Just recently we had an extremely powerful telescope spotted a distant object beyond Pluto that we'd never see with our naked eyes, but because of the fantastic technology of some huge telescope on the top of Mauna Kea in Hawaii, spotted this little object moving out there. And scientists said, let's go have a look at that, and sent a probe out there so far away that even though light travels 186,000 miles a second, it takes 6 hours for light to get there. We just can't conceive of distances that vast. Ultima Thule. You've probably been reading some rather exciting reports in the paper about it. So not only that, they sent the camera out there. The camera flew past it, flying at 32,000 miles an hour, and panned its little camera as it went past the object. So we got this picture, this odd snowball-shaped object that is beyond anything we could imagine out there. And to control that camera, they had to send a signal, and 6 hours later, the probe got the signal and panned the camera. Talk about excellent calculations. They managed it perfectly. And 6 hours before they found out if it worked after they sent the command. I'm impressed. Here's an interesting article from Science News if you want an odd and interesting new thing they've just discovered. They have found that if they inject nanoparticles in the eyes of rats or mice, I don't know how the mice like that, but what they've just discovered is that those nanoparticles will go in, and they're specially designed, they attach themselves back to the retina, and then when they're struck with infrared light, they emit green light. Now these mice can see infrared, and the effect lasts for about a month. What a fascinating thing. They could enable these mice to see a frequency they could never see before. Theoretically, it'd be possible for humans. Who knows how safe the nanoparticles are? I'm just saying, it's the cutting edge of really fascinating things they're doing. And there's a lot that science, as I mentioned, science has helped straighten out, starting with Galileo, starting the battle with religious dogma. On the whole, a successful battle, fortunately. When you've got religion saying, well, the earth is the center, if you disagree with us, we'll just burn you. That was really the policy of the church. And it took brave martyrs to science. Giordano Bruno was burned at the stake February 17th, 1600, because he agreed with Copernicus that the earth was not the center of the universe. And he also proposed that there was an infinite number of inhabited worlds out there. Well, that's heresy. They thought he was quite burn-worthy for saying something like that, but Esoteric says that is the case, that actually there are. And now, even though not that long ago, there was the speculation that we were the only planets in the solar system, in the universe maybe that had life. Now we've got probes out there, Kepler and others, that are finding planets around almost all the stars. So Bruno was right, the church was wrong. That's some pretty harsh karma coming their way, I'm sure. There are thousands of martyrs to the truth, and whether it's religious or scientific or whatever it is, it takes brave people to change things. And, you know, when you look at, science is really so actively opposed to the paranormal. And I'm going to talk about that later. That's really part of the problem with science, is that it's not doing its basic duty of exploring the unknowns. What could be truer to a scientist's ultimate dream is to explore this new unknown realm and open up all kinds of new knowledge. But it's taboo in the scientific worlds to explore reincarnation or the clairvoyance and things like that. It's considered paranormal. And in researching this, I realized that's probably because such a harsh line had to be drawn, they felt at least, had to be drawn between religion and science. In the war between the two, this really sharp dividing line was created that hasn't been overcome yet. And that's part of the problems of science, which now, the next topic is the bad side of science, and really the fact that in many ways it has become its own religion is part of the bad side. It has its believers. Belief is an emotional thing. Believers like to persecute non-believers. That's going on, unfortunately, in the world of science, where you would hope that people, the mental types, staying clear of emotional difficulties in the world, but they don't manage to. They're still human, and they still persecute not only the people with the ideas they consider to be too out there, but the people with the really new ideas. The guy that figured out that RNA actually edited DNA and had all these functions in the cell. Well, nobody wanted to hear that in the cellular biology community. And then he later won a Nobel Prize. This is typically how it goes. The really revolutionary ideas are rejected out of hand. Of course, we do think of science as an amazing thing. I mean, they're wizards of the day, really. They actually make amazing, magical things happen. They're not just saying, well, there's heaven, and listen to us and we'll send you to heaven. They're making magic happen in the world through science. That's, might as well call it magic for all we understand how a cell phone works, or even how an electric motor works. But if you're going to treat science like a religion, well, fortunately, I do think that's changing, but sometimes it goes too far. I was born in the late 50s, and that was a time when science really reigned supreme. Religion was still strong, but everybody compartmentalized. They somehow managed to keep their science in one part of their brain and their religion in the other side. And science is great. Look at the TV and the cars and airplanes and radio and all the amazing things that we have. They couldn't deny it. And I remember when I was in high school looking at my Mormon physics teacher and I didn't dare ask him, but I just wondered, how does he keep these two, the oil and the water, separate in his mind here with the science and the Mormon doctrine? How do you manage that? I don't think you can do it forever. Eventually, there is a war between the ideas in your head, and you've discovered that if you want to know what's true, you're going to have to throw something out. So, when I was a child, scientists didn't know what some of my body parts were for, so they removed them. It was fashionable. Tonsils, who needs those? Appendix, I didn't need that. So, treating scientists and science like a new religion is a mistake. Science has its own dogma, and it's a typical aspect of scientific minds that they crystallize. They're so oriented about what's true, what's got the facts, and trying to make a very definite picture leads to a kind of mental crystallization, which means they really can't accept new ideas. They're not going to be changing their minds again. When Einstein first came along, relativity is amazingly beautiful inspiration that he had. It was demonstrated through experiments again and again, but it wasn't until the last non-believing physicist died that relativity was accepted by all physicists. I mean, death is an odd way to wait for things to change, but that's how it's worked with science. And the funny thing is that even with Einstein, who said so many brilliant things, he really is an interesting person. When quantum physics came around and did not agree with relativity, it was a problem for him. And he never did accept that there might not be he thought there was a problem with quantum physics. There must be some problem with quantum physics. How can it contradict relativity? Well, we get back to our original idea. There's one reality. It does all fit together somehow. We just don't see it yet. And probably the great sin of the scientists, rendering expert opinions on things outside their expertise. Don't ask a scientist about paranormal things, about clairvoyance, unless that's actually what they're studying. Whatever they're studying, you can talk to a scientist and learn so many interesting things. It's worth asking questions and learning. They'll have information that's cutting edge, you haven't heard it before. But if they want to tell you all about the things they don't research, it's time to say, no, I don't need that opinion. And science is responsible for some rather large mistakes in the world. The creation of all kinds of pollutants and chemicals that are very persistent in our environment, that are affecting us hormonally. We've only fairly recently discovered that some of the chemicals that they use to fireproof furniture, to make them flame-proof, well, those things are indestructible. Those bromo, whatever chemicals they had, and they end up desaturating the environment. Everybody's got some in their bloodstream, and it's a hormone mimic. That's not a good thing. But science is all too often looking at we can make this couch not burn, and not looking at the fact that these chemicals have to go somewhere. As much as I like science, I have to bring up a few more of the tremendous mistakes. I mean, lobotomies, that was really not the best approach to mental illness. But that's not that long ago. And if you go to the dentist and they remove one of your mercury fillings you've been carrying around in your head for so long, they have to follow special hazardous waste procedures and have a special company come that is licensed to handle the hazardous waste they've taken out of your mouth. The mercury fillings are considered serious hazardous waste. So many areas where technology, coming up with crops that people can't regrow themselves, maybe makes money for Monsanto. Great technology that drains aquifers to water cows, and it'll take hundreds of years to recharge them. That's not a path that goes anywhere. It ends in an abrupt cutoff of no more water for this entire region. There's not enough thinking ahead here. Science still rejects homeopathy, astrology. Chiropractic's finally getting its day in the sun. Clairvoyance, telepathy, even vegetarianism. Too many things, and each of those is actually an opportunity for a huge discovery to be made. If scientists were to take it seriously and say, why some people are benefiting from this? Let's figure out how and why. Right there, who knows how big the discovery would be if they did that. And as I go through this talk, and I mentioned more and more esoteric things that could be opportunities for scientists to explore, I am hoping that scientists, perhaps some here online, it'll be like a light bulb goes off over some scientist's head and he wants to explore and write a PhD paper or try to earn a Nobel Prize on it. And of course, how many light bulbs does it take to change a scientist? Just one, I hope. The philosophical side of science is another weak spot where religion's job was to raise people's emotionality, to get us out of our lower emotional natures from repellent, greedy, angry, get us up into the higher emotional nature of compassion, affection, appreciation for aesthetic beauty, of cooperation, basically a sensing unity. That's the higher level emotional nature. Religion, still working at it. We wouldn't have had the world wars if it had done a better job of it. But now that science has really squished religion pretty thoroughly across the board, what value system is science replacing religion with? What can we use? What does science offer as a value system for its own decisions? And physicalism so often ends up being a scientific philosophy where just the physical world is considered the only thing that exists. And of course, from the esoteric side, we know that's a very tiny scope of reality to study. There's so much more. I mean, it's really disregarding our consciousness itself, our emotions, our thoughts, our souls. There's so much more than a physicalist approach can explain. Darwinism, people basically creating a value system out of animals that eat other animals and the biggest, toughest animal, that's not going to help humanity. Humans need a better system than dog eat dog. I mean, Darwin's did wonderful work. It's a wonderful description of the adaptation of life, the form on this planet, even our own physical forms have benefited from Darwinian evolutionary principles, but it doesn't provide the values of how do you choose good in this world. We basically need something a lot more than science can provide. Science is not going to give us a standard for good and bad. We have to look somewhere else. And a scientist who hasn't looked somewhere else, hasn't come up with some criteria of good or bad in his behavior, is a tool for evil. They end up being used by corporations and money interests. It happens far too often and leads to that point I made at the very beginning, where we have to worry about the very existence of our planet. And still on the bad side here, I have to say a little more about corruption. It's more and more of a problem. There's a general energy among scientists, I think, that is good. They seek truth, they want to help, but they're human, and you have scientists that have basically sold their souls to corporations and produced the studies that have the outcomes that the corporation has paid for. The tobacco companies can show you a number of studies about how good for you tobacco is. And one of their so-called professors creating one of those studies went on to a job at PragerU, which is an awful place of just sham science on the internet that is now discrediting any science of climate change with the idea that humanity can't influence the weather, we can't influence the climate. But these are fake professors, really, who've prostituted their minds for money. And it's really an embarrassment to the whole institution of science, but it causes a lot of skepticism about science. And that's even more harmful than the results of their lies. The social media contributes a lot to this too, spreading bad science everywhere. People are too ready to believe something because supposedly a scientist said it. I mean, science has not completely lost its credibility, though it's losing it steadily and rapidly these days, partly because of social media nonsense, but partially because of, just read recently at Duke University, there were faked studies, faked data used in these studies. Well, this happens a lot because it's publish or perish. There's this another human dynamic of to succeed, and some people can't resist the temptation to make a few things up to succeed. And it takes so much effort to validate and retry each of these studies that really never was connected to the truth, that so many of them find their way out there and considered to be true. And that fuels the increasing skepticism of science, to the point where you have people these days that doubt that humanity ever even set foot on the moon, that doubt the Earth is round. And the fact that we can get to that state shows that science has lost its credibility to a lot of people. And it's so sad, because those people that doubt that we walked on the moon don't get to share in one of humanity's greatest achievements. It's sad that skepticism has penetrated to that degree. I mean, there are mirrors on the moon that the astronauts left there. Any good observatory can bounce a laser off one of those mirrors and see it bounce back to them. There are plenty of ways to prove we were actually there. There really isn't a doubt about it at all. A few years ago, I was talking to a recent acquaintance, a seemingly rational person, who, in the course of our conversation, assured me that the planets are actually, they're disks. They hang from pegs. And I just gaped at him. I didn't know what to say. Is this a joke? I didn't think. He was so serious. And I couldn't do anything. And other people were watching too, because they kind of knew that he might say something that outrageous. I don't know if he was pranking me or what. But now, in hindsight, I wish I'd said, and the pegs are made of cedar wood, so they don't rot. And if he had had a problem with that information, I was going to have a problem with his information too. Who's he to doubt my nonsense? Oh. But that's the stake. I mean, there are people, this is a real person and living in the world who just had such an opinion. Another area where the media doesn't know how to handle science very well. I mean, there's what is the polar vortex, the super bomb storm, it's the blood moon of super whatchamacallit coming up. Everything is a sensational headline, so they're crying wolf every day over scientific topics. And what if something actually serious comes up? Who's going to believe that? It's just another case in the media trying to sell some clicks on the internet. That's another thing that discredits, that messes with science. Fair and balanced reporting, when the 99.9% of the scientists who know full well, and you can read it every 2 weeks in Science News magazine about the climate change that's happening, media brings up a representative of those scientists to debate a representative of the sold out corporate science people. And that's supposed to be a fair and balanced assessment when you've got this one person who is willing to sell his soul to the oil companies to try to convince us that carbon dioxide is okay, debating somebody who actually knows, like all the rest of the scientists, what's really going on. That gives the public the wrong idea about science. We have a lot coming our way in science that is driven by money. Money has corrupted things pretty thoroughly. We've got, for the cell phones, you've got 5G coming. There hasn't been enough time to study the effects of that. It's a different frequency. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to be passing right through us. Does it have an effect? We're going to find out. But it won't be because they've done the research beforehand. It'll be because we're all exposed to it. And that's not a good way to find out. I've been following the Roundup glyphosate situation. I believed Monsanto, I confess, when they advertised so many years ago that if you spray your weeds with this, it kills the weeds and then decomposes. Perfect. I thought that was a great solution. Well, now I've got some Roundup karma because I sprayed the stuff, and a lot of people have, and it doesn't decompose. They've just lied to us. It goes into the water system, it goes into everything. There's no proof that it's correlated with any particular thing that's going on with us, except there are some correlation. I mean, it's correlated. There's no proof of causality, but you've got graphs of gluten intolerance and celiac disease that rise at exactly the same pace as the rate that Roundup and glyphosate shows up in our environment is used to saturate wheat fields, because wheat you harvest dead, so you can spray all the Roundup on that you want. And it kills all the weeds and the wheat, who cares? You harvest all this dead wheat full of Roundup. And now the amount of Roundup glyphosate that's being sprayed is increasing tenfold or more because of GMO, genetically modified organisms. They've modified plants to be resistant to it. It's a pretty tricky thing because this Roundup attacks a critical biochemical pathway in plants. That's how it kills it. They really had to re-engineer these plants. There could be other effects to having done that. But these plants won't be killed by Roundup, so they can just drench the fields with Roundup, kill all the weeds and everything else, and this one crop will survive. But so much more of it ends up in our water system and our environment than before. There's Olympic forest, the timber harvesting that's going on out on the Olympic Peninsula where we live. They spray Roundup from the air after they harvest the trees so that they can have nothing growing there and choose what they want to plant afterwards. And there are a lot of people fighting it out there now. But Monsanto, these scientists that work for Monsanto, I would not want the responsibility that everybody working there has for poisoning millions of people and environments. And to the Monsanto people listening, let me say you've got a beautiful website. I've visited, it's lovely. It's got honeybees flying around. It's got all these that are killed by the GMO things they've created, but they don't mention that. They've got, they got somebody posting a question. What do you say when people say your product is harmful? They say, when it's used as we say it should be, it's not harmful. We've got a whole bunch of studies to prove it by the same guy that defended the smoking industry. No, I don't put that part in there. But beautiful website. And I also have to say, though I studied chemistry in college, I'm not a chemist. I know the esoteric side of this a lot better. I know the public consumer side of being outraged about things pretty well. I can't say I can prove that Roundup is killing people or doing this or that or anything like that. It's just that somebody just won an $80 million lawsuit claiming that his cancer was caused by it, and there are thousands more lawsuits like that. Maybe that's going to decide things. So we'll find out. Speaking of we'll find out, we're the guinea pigs of the greedy when it comes to how science gets used in this world. That's the 5G, the Monsanto products, the GMOs. Some countries say no to this. The government actually is doing the appropriate job of government to protect citizens from powerful corporations and moneyed interests. Japan will not import any GMO products. Germany will not import any grain from North America. It will only import it from Russia and the Ukraine. And interestingly, Russia has taken a step to say, we're going to get rid of sprays. We're trying to go organic. And I think they're really onto a great idea. They're going to have billions of dollars worth of organic produce to sell to the rest of the world, that when it finally decides it doesn't want GMO or whatever anymore, and they'll have a healthier population. So, I didn't think I'd be saying something good about Russia, did you? So who's going to, like I said, it's public outrage is the only tool we have to stand up to the greedy interests in this country. The government's not doing it. They've done a poor job anyway, and certainly the government's in charge right now is relaxing restrictions on everybody. So, I'm almost finished with this bad side of science thing. I'll get on to some other stuff. But science does not see the big picture well enough. They can look at a small system, see how they can adjust this small system, fix something, but the big picture of what's affected by introducing a new chemical, introducing a new species. This is a big mistake that science makes too. Well, we have too many of this here. Let's introduce this predatory species. Oh, we forgot to check whether this was nocturnal or diurnal. I guess they're not going to eat each other because this one comes out in the day, this comes out at night. So, what is it? Mongooses in Hawaii that were there to eat something else, rats, right? Their schedules don't overlap, so the mongooses never did eat the rats. Anyway, and this is why I'm very skeptical of scientific approaches to solving global warming with dumping iron in the oceans to create phytoplankton growth. What else is that going to affect? Can they see the big picture? Well, since they don't even know about the etheric body of the planet that we'll be discussing later, they don't see the big picture. We know they don't. So obviously, for them to try some drastic solution or suspend an aerosol in the atmosphere that blocks some of the sun from hitting the earth, I don't know. I don't think that's a good idea probably for humans to take on, something like, or things in space that block the sun from striking the earth. I really think we should be skeptical when they produce those ideas as a solution for global warming. So what do we do? I mean, can we ask a scientific institution to police itself? That's one thing, to step up and say, look, this is bad science over here. This is a charlatan. This is somebody who is promoting a corporate agenda. Can science do that? Not too likely, because they have a bad track record of attacking the wrong people, unfortunately. Like I said, they attack the people with the new discoveries. They attack the people investing in the paranormal. And I wouldn't want to be called up before the Inquisition of the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, which is a real thing. And they have a magazine, and they are skeptical about everything. And these days, you would think that they would be attacking the very things that Esoteric says are good, reincarnation, whatever. They've got much easier targets than that these days. And of the real nonsense, the real nonsense is out there. There are so many. We need a lot of skepticism in this world. So fortunately, I looked at their website, and they're actually harnessing their skepticism for good in a lot of ways. So it's not as bad as I thought it'd be. I thought it'd be the new Inquisition now that science has replaced religion. They actually sent a representative to a Sasquatch conference And the person came back and said, you know, these people were really interested in reconsidering their ideas maybe, or they just wanted to hear each other's thoughts about Sasquatch. It was actually a very fun conference. But, well, that's a good skeptic. But you know, it's not all hopeless. I want to point out a success. The ozone layer. It was suffering tremendously. It had a growing hole that was going to eventually basically cover everything, and ultraviolet light would be pouring through and causing lots of problems. The entire world, the scientists got together, they had a consensus, they banned these chemicals, and the ozone layer is recovering nicely. So, you know, science can fix some of its problems. Here's a quote from a fellow named Gus Beth I thought was very good. I used to think that top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that 30 years of good science could address these problems. I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. Well, I challenge the scientists, don't stop there. Figure out how to do that. Take that as a challenge. How do we have the spiritual and cultural transformation that we have to save us, to save life on this planet? That's a good thing for science to be trying to figure out. And I challenge them to do that. And when they do that, they'll be working with the great spiritual intelligences of the planet that they don't acknowledge the existence of, but that we know of in esoterics, that are trying really hard to wake humanity up to acting for the benefit of each other, to create that transformation. That is, we'll get there. It'd be nice to have a scientist helping us get there too. You know, if they can start with themselves, if they can rein themselves in first, that would really be really good. And the earlier thought about, let's have a value system that scientists actually can accept, that's not based on a religious thing that they feel forced to reject. You know, an obvious value system that values each other and health of our children. It's not impossible to come up with something that people agree on. Smart is not enough, though. Scientists are not going to solve it on their own. And science is not enough. It takes all the disciplines working together, and it takes more than intelligence working in a person to solve this. I mean, look at Walter White in Breaking Bad. He was very smart. He needed more than smart to make it through. And of course, I've talked about this many times in talks. For some reason, humanity tends to think of the scale of evolution as smarter, 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 smarter. And that's really not it. That the real progress that somebody makes is towards unity, getting it, seeing that we're all one, seeing how we work together. That's the scale of the evolution of consciousness, from isolated consciousness fighting for itself to seeing the value of community and some rules maybe that help us work together, then having some ideals about how we could all live, and then those ideals that grow into a sense of shared responsibility and unity working together. That's the direction of consciousness evolution, of human evolution. It's not just about being smart and powerful and rich. As long as I'm talking to the scientists, here's some more things to investigate. I was watching a fantastic interview, Russell Brand, who I recommend his interviews. He'll just go right in the face and ask people the tough questions, and he's very smart. He is interviewing Teresa Chung from the Institute of Noetic Research, or she referred to that, and she had a couple of good stories to tell. Either of these things, to investigate things and really understand what's going on, would open an entire new field of science. One of these things was they gathered psychics who, claimed to have some ability, and they showed them a series of pictures of people who were alive, and among them were people who were dead. And they asked this person, can you tell us who's alive and dead? And they did a billion times better than chance. They could look at that picture and tell you if that person's alive or dead or not. They had enough of a connection with whoever that was. How do you explain that? Let's not just write it off. You know, that scientists do that too often. Let's try to explain it. There was another test that they did where just with ordinary people as the subjects, they would show them a series of pictures, and every so often would be a disturbing image. You know, I don't know what, maybe violent or awful in some way. And as they were showing these pictures, they were measuring skin conductivity, you know, that sort of thing. And the people reacted. They could measure a reaction in the skin before the disturbing image was revealed. Before each disturbing image, the person in their body somehow already knew the next image was disturbing. Explain that. Let's not just say, oh, well, I don't know. Let's figure it out. Come on, scientists. Nobel Prizes are waiting for you. I mean, there's so many points in esoterics that the scientists who don't reject the unknown, you know, who don't have crystallized minds, who are willing to really be curious and find the latest cool understanding to share. Well, they're out there, and actually, we were fortunate. There are a number of scientists who have made that effort. And I've been reading those books. Bruce Lipton, The Biology of Belief. For example, in his book, he talks about the power of placebo effect, that when they test a new chemotherapy drug, they give the drug to, you know, two groups of people that are in the same situation that have cancer, and they give this one group the drug, and the other group gets a placebo. Well, the people getting the chemotherapy drug lose their hair. 30% of the people in the control group that get the placebo also lose their hair. Do we understand that? How that works? No, but wouldn't that be good? We'd understand how our consciousness is affecting our health. There's so much that can be done from a better understanding of that. He says the placebo effect alone would tell us so much about how we can work with our own illnesses. It's a particularly powerful effect for depression, for irritable bowel syndrome, for cough, for anxiety disorders. And the scientists complain that this placebo effect disrupts the discovery and trials of new forms of medicine, because they give their new medicine to this group, and how can they tell if it works or not when the people in the control group get cured too? So, how about trying to figure out what's really going on? These people aren't afraid, you know. I'm going to mention some more of these authors and some interesting stories from their research. But they stepped forward, and of course they were not welcomed with their critiques of science or their really strange experiments by the rest of their scientific community. The fortunate ones among them wrote incredibly readable books and sold millions of them, and that's helped them out, and I benefited tremendously from them. But I don't discuss all of these esoteric ideas that we're about to get into with my coworkers, because it's not really time. You can't just throw these ideas at people. And I can't tell people to read the Alice Bailey books. That's not going to work, or the other esoteric sources. Fortunately, I could actually say, you know, I've been reading this book by Gary Zukov, The Dancing Wu Li Masters, and maybe they'll read it, because that is popular among the scientific world. But what Lawrence says about this, and I've got there's a handout over there, by the way, if you didn't get one, that's got a lot of quotes from Lawrence, and it mentions all the books. He says it'll be hundreds of years before scientists really before they're forced to acknowledge things like the existence of the soul, you know, the higher worlds of consciousness beyond our ordinary scientifically explored world. He says that we have a long wait for that. And it's also important not to create a confusing presentation of esoteric facts with science. And I had to really think about that, because there's a big difference between the two. Science discovers things, it's reproducible. Scientists in general agree on them eventually over the years. Esoteric facts are actually given to us not from science at all. It's a different source from along the spectrum that I was talking about of evolution of consciousness. Those who have gone further. There are those who have gone further than me. Some of them are probably in this room, and those who've gone further than those in this room, etc., etc. It's a continuum, this evolution of consciousness. They're being so far beyond that whatever's a mystery to us in this human world is not a mystery to them. And they, because one of the things you learn along the way to get there, are compassionate. And they see us struggling in our ignorance and our tremendous fear of separation, isolation, and all the problems that we have. They share these esoteric facts with us that we can't necessarily validate for ourselves, but they hang together in a consistent system. They do predict things, that's a good validation. They do, in some ways, relate to the scientific facts we have already, and I'm going to try to talk about those. Rupert Sheldrake, Linda gave me a great book called Science Set Free. He tries to bring up how science has not got it all worked out. And he does a great job of that with example after example. Just pointing out that there are people that don't eat. And it's not anorexia. There are people that are in a religious situation, something like that, that simply, and they've had people stay with them to verify this, they don't eat, they don't go to the bathroom, nothing is passing through them. They don't drink water. They don't drink anything. Yet this one woman in a Christian tradition, she has stigmata and bleeds from her hands once a week and loses weight significantly from that, and then gradually regains it. Where does that come from? Let's figure this out. That is a doorway into an entirely new discovery, and I think it's the one that I'll be talking about a little bit later, of the etheric world that's all around us, that science is only beginning to explore. Rupert Sheldrake points out an interesting thing. Speed of light. Why should we assume it's constant? Well, it probably is, and okay, it seems to measurably be constant. But assuming it is a little tricky. Assuming anything in science, that's one of the problems of science. A lot of what we're given as science is based on assumptions at some level that have no longer been treated as assumptions. The speed of light, very fixed at this point. But in the 1930s and 1940s, it was 20 kilometers per second slower. Nobody could explain that. It was frustrating. It frustrated the scientists. Well, the measuring instruments got better, and so they started to think, well, okay, now we've got it. Our measurements are better. It is constant. Let's just say it is. As part of just saying that it is constant, they redefined the meter in terms of how far light travels over a given period of time. So the yardstick now changes in length based on the speed of light. They'll never be wrong again about the speed of light. It's always the same because you're always measuring with a yardstick based on how fast it is. That's Science Set Free. I really recommend that book. Fascinating overview. He's got a lot of points to make there. I don't have time to go into so many of the really interesting things that these authors are saying, but my talk was going to be subtitled How to Carry On If You Don't Understand Quantum Physics, because I started looking into it. I wanted to cover it in this talk, and I thought, I'm not going to have anything to say if I don't start getting it. But fortunately, my wife and daughter had great books to recommend on quantum physics, and I've been reading them both. And one of them is The Dancing Wu Li Masters by Gary Zukov, who explains things in a very lucid way, and then he re-explains them in another different way until you get it. And he comes with relativity. It's a tough one to explain. Gets into quantum mechanics, and it was there that I felt like, oh, now I have something to talk about. Not from the perspective of a quantum physicist. I'm a layman of limited understanding, but now I can talk about it. I'm going to get to that. Great book. Michael Talbot, The Holographic Universe. He is pointing at something that quantum physics implies. I'll talk about a little more in a little section on quantum physics, but that behind everything is some one thing. Implicate order, he calls it, that everything is connected to, that connects us all, that is independent of the limitations of our physical reality. It's fascinating, and he has many stories in it. One of the stories I think was kind of funny. He was working with a clairvoyant healer who could actually see what was going on with his organs, and he was having a problem with his spleen. And his spleen started acting up, so he sent it loving thoughts and light and healing energy. And it didn't get better by a couple of days later, and he got frustrated because he was impatient, and he yelled at his spleen. He said, "Look, I need you to do your job. Just get to it and work properly." And then he went to the psychic a couple of days after that, and she was looking at, "Yeah, your spleen. Your spleen is really upset." She looked at it some more and said, "Did you yell at your spleen?" So he was busted. He had yelled at his spleen. And she told him, "Always send loving thoughts to your organs. They don't criticize them. They're doing the best they can." Shafika Karagula wrote a book called Breakthrough Creativity, another one called Through the Curtain, where she was a neuropsychiatrist that bravely bucked her field to go into this research and kept finding doctors that would refuse to admit to this at first, but she would get them to eventually admit that they could see into people's bodies. They could diagnose without medical equipment. They had some abilities. Many people do out there that will not admit to it because you can still be considered insane for admitting that you see things. But the people that really sincerely want to heal others, that's how you get an ability like that, That's how whatever other beings and forces are in the universe that are helping us, they'll help somebody who sincerely is trying to be a good healer, and they'll help them open up that sense. So she would test the doctors with herself, to say, "No instrument, just tell me what's going on with me," and they would be able to look into her system and tell her. She wrote about that in her books. It's fascinating. When it comes to reincarnation, there's Ian Stevenson and Brian Weiss with story after story of past life regression, according in Brian Weiss's case, Ian Stevenson in children who, beyond any possibility of imagination, could describe the situations in their last lifetime where they lived and how they died and the people they knew. There's thousands of these stories of children who are able to confirm they know things there's no way they could have known otherwise. All right, let's spend a few minutes on the topics of the day. Global warming. Lawrence, he says, oil, nuclear power, these are very clumsy methods for generating electricity and energy. But there are so much better ways, and we could be given that information, but we can't be trusted. The way he puts it is, these techniques can't be trusted to bandits. Too much of humanity is bandits. Powerful people who, if they got a hold of these ideas and turn them into weapons or turn them into ways to exercise power or enrich themselves, we're just not mature enough to have these free energy kind of devices and methods, unfortunately. It's a real double whammy in that because we're not, the methods we do use are wrecking things. And Lawrence says a really fascinating thing, that scientists are wrong when they say that all of the Earth's heat comes from the sun. He says 3/5 of the Earth's heat is from the interplay of the Earth's etheric body, the energy body of the Earth, the next subtler level of matter that science is only just discovering. 3/5 of the Earth's heat is from the interplay of the etheric body of the Earth with the magnetic field, and the 2/5 is from the sun. And he says that the nuclear explosions we've set off have disrupted the etheric field of the planet, allowing substances and energies through that the etheric body would have blocked. We've made huge blunders there in our ignorance. A fascinating topic that I would like to research more to understand better is immunization. It's it's a real phenomenon. Immunization can create immunity in people. There shouldn't be a doubt about that. It's been going on for a long time. And Don recommended a fascinating book to me that I haven't finished reading, but I've read enough of it to read the history of immunization. It turns out it's been going on for much longer than I thought. That immunization from smallpox started long, long ago, and they understood that people could acquire immunity, and what they would do is find somebody with a mild case of smallpox, not the kind that killed people, but they got over it easily, and they would grind up the scabs from this person and make a concoction to give others the disease. And they would all get a mild case of smallpox. They would have immunity then to the bad cases of smallpox. And they were doing it in China, long ago, in Europe, it was in Turkey. So that kind of immunization was in place far earlier than I thought. They'd occasionally make a mistake and get their material from somebody who had a bad form of the smallpox and then kill hundreds of people. So the science needed improving, but the cowpox thing that they turned eventually into this smallpox vaccine is only a variation on the old theme. But once science got into immunizing people, corporations got into it too. And it's as important as it is to acknowledge the success of immunization to protect us from some diseases. There's an aspect of how these things work. They can't just put the viral material into your body and get enough of an immune response to create the immunity. There is a chemical called an adjuvant that is added to that material to cause the body to react strongly, have a strong immune response. It used to be mercury, now it's aluminum. And this adjuvant has different effects on different people, and there are casualties to vaccination where people are injured seriously and maybe too many vaccines are administered at once. What if you have too much adjuvant? What if your immune system goes berserk? There are unique personal aspects of immune systems that are not taken into account. Why are they vaccinating babies for hepatitis B now? There are a lot of irregularities in the vaccine world right now, and part of it is because the corporations have immunized themselves from any lawsuits. They can't be sued for a problem that was due to a vaccine. They've gotten the government working with them on that, and then they've even got the vaccines required for many different situations. So it's many billions of dollars. If they can come up with a new vaccine, get it required, they're immune to any lawsuit from the damages. Well, that's just an enormous cash cow for these companies. And as we've seen, corporations can sometimes not be serving the public good. So it really deserves a lot more attention to make sure. I mean, this is again where if we had a real government, it would be making sure that these things were safe. That's a job, but we don't have that. Interesting thing in esoterics it says about abortion when the soul joins the body. According to the esoterics that I've been reading, the soul watches this development of the body, and only at the first breath of the child does the soul enter and connect and join with and become basically that person. Until then, it's an animal form being constructed. It's not human yet until that's happened. Now, of course, babies can be born much earlier. That connection can be made much earlier than at the normal term. So that's a factor in whether there's a viable person there or not. If the soul looks at this form at birth and says, it's not going to meet the requirements that I have for this incarnation of goals and my needs as a soul, it will refuse to enter, and then the baby's stillborn. So there's an angle on it from esoterics that it doesn't solve the problems, but it gives a little more information. Pollutants, of course, are a huge topic of the modern day, and we're so far down the road with this, much further than we should be, with heavy metals and radioactive chemicals and long-lived organic compounds. It's going to take some really remarkable new way to clear those out of our environment. Otherwise, the only way they'll be cleared is with time. And when the hundreds of thousands or millions of years that are required, when that's the time we're talking about, then let's hope it's not time that has to clean the planet up from the mess we've made. So it's interesting to talk about how esoterics relates to science. The founders of Blavatsky was the founder of the Theosophical Society here. Two main people in the society later on were Charles Leadbeater and Annie Besant. They were great pioneers, and long before physics found antimatter, they had an explanation for it. Many years before, around 1900, that it's actually these fundamental particles have a spin, an internal spin and external spin that's the opposite direction. Well, if this one's spinning this way inside and that way outside, and this one's spinning the opposite ways inside and outside, it's antimatter. So their diagrams are really fascinating at these internal and external spins. They predicted the existence of isotopes of elements because they could observe them with their abilities, and 5 years after they predicted them, science discovered them. They predicted astatine, an element in the periodic table. They knew what its molecular weight would be. Their molecular weight assessments from the clairvoyant investigations of these materials were really accurate. It was surprising. The nature of the proton with the quarks in it, they actually had a picture of that had the same number of quarks in it. Well, actually twice the number, but they said that's because antimatter is actually there too. And it's because it doesn't touch. There isn't this annihilation. They have these explanations that maybe will mean something to scientists at some point. Let's see. Well, time is moving by, and I wanted to say a little bit about the quantum mechanics aspect of this thing. The quantum mechanics, the equations hold up beautifully. That's miraculous. They can predict things with probabilities. With Newtonian physics, you could say where it was going to be. It was very definite. You can only work with probabilities in quantum mechanics. And Sheldrake says he likes that because it implies that there's a lot more to the picture, and it makes it clear that there might be conscious choice in there somewhere. There's consciousness involved. And that's one of the key aspects of quantum, is that that consciousness has some kind of relationship to matter. The observation of something affects it. Well, this is, for esoterics, that's no surprise at all. We're saying that all the time. That basically, consciousness is setting matter in motion because the material our thoughts are made of is a kind of matter. That we're setting that in motion with our intentions. We're setting emotional matter in motion. We're setting our physical bodies in motion because consciousness is using this body to do things. This is consciousness affecting matter through consciousness. That's not a surprise at all. It's news to scientists, though. Let's hope that they get clearer on that. And I hope that 100 years from now, it will seem ridiculous, this scientific idea out there that consciousness is some kind of emanation of matter. Like the matter is this mechanical thing that gives off consciousness like fumes. That's exactly backwards. Consciousness uses matter. The reason consciousness has assumed the forms it has that matter has assumed the forms it has to be our bodies is so that consciousness can use that form to learn and interact. We couldn't interact with the physical world without a physical body that can contact physicality. That's what our body is for. We have an emotional body for the same function, according to esoterics, and a mental body. That's how we contact those worlds and that kind of material. But the most striking thing, I think, out of the quantum stuff is about how things can become entangled. That, for example, if you have a physical atom that decomposes radioactively, it can emit a photon in two directions. Those photons are considered entangled, and if one has this polarization, the other will have the opposite polarization. If one has this angular momentum, the other will have the opposite. Conservation of momentum, or the fundamental rules here, they both start in the same place, and so each has to have the opposite of the other to make it all add up. Well, they're entangled, which means that, according to Gary Zukov, and not all physicists agree with him on this, but let's suppose this photon's going this way and you put it through a device that changes its polarization. Well, it simultaneously changes the polarization of the other photon. And that's what Einstein had the big problem with, because that is happening across a distance faster than the speed of light. Nothing's supposed to go faster than the speed of light. There's nothing that's been sent from this photon to that photon to tell it to do this. They are affecting each other without any intermediary, without any means, or it's as if they were not separate. It's as if they're still the same thing. So how can they be the same thing and be so far apart? Well, this brings physicists to this awful problem of locality. The general assumption in physics was the only thing that can affect something is something nearby. It's affecting it through beams or whatever. Something's hitting it, moving it, changing it. Well, somehow something very far away is affecting something with no means whatsoever. This is not a physical phenomenon. It's happening in another level of substance or existence or dimension. You can throw all the words at it you want, because nobody actually in the physics world has got an understanding of it that's clear enough. They're baffled as can be by it, and Einstein couldn't figure it out. The formulas sure work great, but that doesn't mean we know why or what's really going on. But I think it's a beautiful idea to look at this entanglement and note that in the scientific theories, everything started as one thing in the Big Bang, and then it all separated. Well, what if it's all entangled? What if every single bit of it can communicate with any other bit of it immediately faster than the speed of light? Well, then you get into Michael Talbot's model of the holographic universe, where every single small bit of it's got the whole picture in it. Like when you create a hologram, it's got the whole picture in every little bit, and that's why you can see it, the 3D aspect of it. So there's a little bridge into esoterics. Another thing in quantum physics is this idea that things are popping in and out of existence. The mass of a proton involves particles that they say are coming in and out of existence in the quantum foam. What a strange idea. But they actually participate in the mass. And they come and they go, and they come and they go. Well, in esoterics, I don't think they're coming and going. I think they're basically just becoming undetectable, is really probably the more accurate way to describe what scientists are experiencing. And they're going into the undetectable realms, which are, according to science, the ethers. The physical plane, according to Theosophy, etc., is got solid, liquid, gaseous, and then 4 ethers above that. And that we have a body made out of the substance of those ethers. That's the energy body. Behind us, in every motion and action in this world, is behind that is the energy body, the etheric body. The planet has one, we have one. There's a whole realm that's what these clairvoyants who are able to do healing investigations are looking at. They can look in through your body and see the etheric structure, see where, oh, there's no energy in that spot. It's a dead spot. Or there's too much there. It's got to get spread out. Etheric healing is the healing mode of the future. And the true healers all along have used that method. So when you get into the ethers, that's probably where these things go that seem to disappear. They've become a subtler material, not measurable. Then they go back into the measurable zone again, and they're fluctuating between the two. So, okay. Consciousness itself, according to esoterics, has its own rules that science is yet to discover, but are going to be key to ethical science, science that's really about helping everybody. I just want to briefly go through some of these laws because Lawrence puts them out there. I really encourage you to read Henry Lawrence. He lays it all out there beautifully. But the law of self-realization, that this evolution of consciousness is all through the effort of the point of consciousness that each of us are. This is part of hylozoics, which is what Pythagoras taught long ago, that Lawrence brought back. saying that each of us is this point of consciousness, ultimate unit of matter, consciousness and motion, and we are evolving, and everything else is body. We're this point of existence and using bodies to evolve, and everything we have, the ability that we have now to think, our capacities, are the result of our own efforts. No one gave them to us. We struggled through the mineral and vegetable, animal kingdoms even to get to this point where we have what we have now. And all the progress we make is through our own efforts moving ahead and expanding our consciousness. The law of rebirth I've already brought up. We cycle in and out of forms. Consciousness takes form, learns, releases the form. That applies to more than just humans. It applies to animals and plants. Consciousness is continually taking on these forms in order to have experiences and learn. Sowing and reaping, cause and effect. We ourselves, everything we think, say, or do causes effects. They come back to us in some way or other. That's a primary postulate of esoterics. And how that can happen? Well, that point of consciousness we were contacting at the beginning of this talk, it's aware of everything that we do. It knows full well what we did and why we did it, what our motives are. It's very clear from that level of consciousness where we were in and out of balance. Lawrence C. says the law of unity basically says that we're not separate, really. We're under the illusion that we are. But just like quantum physics handily is telling us, there's this level where things are all connected. And efforts that we make in the direction towards unity are progress. That it's a particularly odd human experience that we have here, to be feeling so isolated from each other. And all the higher worlds, unity is a given, consciousness is shared, it's a collective consciousness. There's not a problem with not being understood or being alone. That's a human problem. And as we gradually start to find unity in this world, we've solved a huge puzzle, and then we're ready for the next, where we are immersed in unity and love, really. All right, well, a little time left. I want to get into some of the predictions science has made. It's interesting going through the Lawrence books, the Bailey books. The year 2025 came up again and again. And it was predicted that some big discovery is going to be made then. It apparently has to do with the etheric world. Lawrence says at one point, well, up until the year 2025, scientists are going to have to make do. If they're trying to study the etheric world, they're going to have to make do with the people who can see it. But that's only until 2025. Apparently, this opportunity to somehow film or contact or record the etheric world is supposed to happen. And that is going to blow the doors off of science, off of medicine, obviously, off of understanding of the planet. And there are some things to be discovered in the etheric world. That's the densest world that the devas come down into. The nature spirits, angels, whatever you want to call them, they don't take on bodies of as dense a material as ours. But once we have objective awareness of the etheric world, they're going to be visible. There are other inhabitants of that world too. Well, one of the ways that Lawrence postulates that we'll discover this world is by filming the process of death somehow, videotaping it or whatever, so that when the etheric body separates from the physical, it will be seen. And it's not so far-fetched, really. If a TV remote control is flashing infrared light at the TV. If you aim your video camera at that and play it back, record it, you'll see a flashing white light there. The video camera can see the infrared. Our eyes can't. But cameras can see more than we can. So a camera that can see, and maybe it's from seeing subatomic particles, something, is going to reveal the etheric world to us. It's a huge breakthrough for us. And science it's just going to have to throw out so many theories. This is one reason you can't just bank on science. It has to throw all its theories out every so often. So let's see. Etheric world, Lawrence says nuclear physicists have already started penetrating into the domains of the lowest etheric matter. So these particles they're discovering are essentially etheric matter, so maybe that's part of the key to filming it. Another thing that's mentioned about 2025, it's the end of the scope for the teachings that were given 100 years ago from Theosophy, Bailey, 2025. That's what they were supposed to be for until then. That's actually approaching now. It's kind of interesting to think that we're so close to what must be an opportunity for new information to come out. And of course, we're going to need new information if the etheric world becomes visible to us. And it's not just that it will become visible to us through devices. That's the next step in the evolution of our forms, is that our etheric eyes begin to be able to see it as well. Many people's eyes already can, probably some people in this room. It's not okay to admit to it yet, but it's supposed to be a broader and broader phenomena. And even though through Blavatsky, this esoteric knowledge was brought back to humanity in 1875, there were many in the planetary leadership that thought they should wait, that it was premature, should wait until enough humans have etheric vision along the natural time frame so that they can verify some of these esoteric facts. There was a little argument they had. But thankfully, they did bring that information out, or I wouldn't have any of this to talk about. Here's a little tidbit from esoterics, just moving on beyond this fantastic etheric revelation, but there's more about it in the handout. Very unhygienic to bury bodies. It's really a health problem across this world. The Theosophists actually helped start the first crematoriums in the US long ago. This is something probably this etheric awareness will help us realize too, because some of the cause of most diseases originates in the etheric as well, according to Lawrency. So hopefully we'll straighten that one out too. Probably the scariest thing I ever read in esoterics was that between Mars and Jupiter was a planet. Digging out the scientific facts for you here, sharing a scary one. It was a planet. Its humanity got so far out of control, out of harmony, out of line with its real nature and purpose. They managed to destroy their entire planet. I didn't think that would ever be allowed by the powers that be that run a planet and for whom the whole planet is their body of incarnation, you know? Really? They're going to allow humanity to do that? Well, apparently it's happened. So there's more of a note of urgency for us. We're going to be allowed to really blow it. We're not going to be treated like children and saved from our follies. So let's get it right. Oh, and those souls that were on that planet, humans that were there, they're here now. They had to go somewhere. Along with others. It's not just only from there. Well, I just put this out there. One of my own tales from the etheric. I have actually had a couple of opportunities to objectively perceive the etheric world. And I'm not going to try to explain this experience. I think it's an etheric experience, but it was fascinating. I was alone in a room, and I saw a mist moving across the floor. And I thought, well, that must be etheric. I mean, how can I learn more about this? You know, what is this going on here? There's like a thin mist, maybe an inch thick, just steadily moving across the floor. So I put my hand down in it and lifted up, and it left a handprint. The mist flowed around the handprint. And that was a good experiment. But then suddenly, right next to the handprint, boom, a big paw print appeared. Like as big as a bear paw print. And there was nobody in the room. It was just me in there. And then, boom, a boot print appeared that looked like a Vibram boot sole. And then, whoosh, a car tire track whooshed through the mist. So there you go.
There you have it. Just saying.
I would never think I was alone again after that, so that was good. So we've come to the end of the time. Let me wrap up. you know, for all of this, I think it should be clear from a lot of things I've been saying, science and esoterics, they're not going to be working together for a while yet. Scientists have a long way to go to accept the story I just told, or a lot of other things. You know, reincarnation, another thing I know for a fact, an absolute fact in my own experience. This is not open to debate. No one can talk me out of my own experience. But science was not going to be ready to accept it for a long time. There are these brave scientists. I respect their efforts. We're going to end up at the destination of these things joining eventually. This reality that science and esoterics are both trying to explain, we're a part of that reality. We're true things. If you want to know truth, if you want to know reality, you can look inside. And that takes us right back to that first exercise at the beginning of the talk. We're not parts of reality. Parts sounds like broken apart and needs to be put back together. We are of that reality. We're of that place where everything is connected. We manifest that reality through ourselves. The sooner we figure that out, the sooner we can get busy saving this planet. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.